Welcome to this session. In this session, we are going to discuss another aspects of market failure that is resulting through from asymmetric information is called moral hazard. So, moral hazard is the asymmetric information problem that occurs after a financial transaction takes place. So, when the seller of a security may have incentives to hide information, engage in activities that are undesirable for the purchases of the security. Moral hazard has the important consequences for whether a firm finds it easier to raise funds with a debt than with the equity contracts. So, let us discuss this concept, the concept called moral hazard in detail. What does it mean? So, let us take, in order to explain this, let me take the case of existence of insurance. In the insurance market, how the problem of moral hazard exists. So, in the case of insurance market, for example, health insurance market, after buying, this is an exposed behavior on the side of those who bought insurance. That means indifference to a loss because of the existence of insurance. So, what happens that once you got insurance coverage, because then actually your medical bill, it will be paid by the insurance companies, and you have a tendency to utilize healthcare resources even if it is not even required, right? Because this is actually called, in the case of health insurance market, we can say that the use or provision of more expensive care because the insurer reimburse the cost. So, if put in a very simple language, that means suppose if you have health insurance coverage, then even for some small illness, a minor illness, disease condition, you will be visiting a hospital. And even for hospitalization, some of the illness episode, it may not need hospitalization, but since you have insurance coverage, you think that is anyway the insurer is going to reimburse, insurer is going to pay your bill, you have an incentive to use the hospitalization facilities, even if it's not really necessary. So, that is one. Then another one is taking less preventive actions. That means since you have insurance coverage, you know that the price of healthcare is going to be zero for you. So, you will be willing to take more risk whichever is related to your health. Even driving or taking some more risky activities, you will be getting engaged because you think that you have been covered with a health insurance for your health related aspects. So, the issue of moral hazard, it arises because medical needs are not fully monitorable. You know why? Because of asymmetric information. So, moral hazard arises because medical needs are not fully monitorable, mainly because asymmetric information. So, a insurance company cannot really monitor or assess how much care an insuree is required, right? Because these are the not fully, there is no clear cut information about it, because only the individual who using it know whether how much care he needs, and even only hospital within about the providers of care also, for them also there is actually between the providers of the care and the insurance company, for them also there is asymmetric information about the medical needs of patients. So, both insured and healthcare providers on the same side of the incentive system. That means insured because for him the healthcare cost is zero, and for healthcare providers because they are also a business entity, they have the incentive to maximize their profit. So, there is a saying that whatever the built bed, all the built beds are always occupied bed, right? So, that means they always need to, whatever the healthcare facilities they already built, they want to ensure that there is all the full capacity utilization is happening. So, if I put like that, actually simply it has both demand side and supply side moral hazard we can identify in the case of insurance market. One is on the demand side, it is called over utilization of healthcare because insurance will pay the bill. And the second one is actually the take less preventive care because you have been covered with health insurance. So, here the marginal cost is 0 due to the health insurance coverage. So, let us look at this diagram where the price is given on the y axis, and on the x axis the quantity of healthcare products are given. So, this one is the demand curve. This is the demand curve of this particular individual, for example, or we can also make it as a market demand curve as well. So, the demand curve also says that this is the willingness to pay for the healthcare product, and suppose here the price is this much, a consumer they will be buying this much healthcare products if the price is this much, for example. So, each point we can see that when the price keep on declining, when the lower the price, you can see that the consumers, the people will be demanding more healthcare, right, when the moment the price keep on declining, right. So, that means there is a inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. So, based on this, suppose take for example P1, an individuals, suppose the price is P1 in the market. So, in the healthcare market, suppose the price is P1. So, given this given P1 price, the quantity demanded in the market is going to be Q1, right. This is going to be the quantity demanded. So, what will be the total medical bill? You know that P1 times that this P1 times all this area, P1 times so these are the all the healthcare bill, that the P1 times Q1, right. P1 times Q1 is going to be the total medical expenditure of this particular individual, for example. You know what, once the individual is having insurance coverage, you know what is the, though the market price is P1, but he has to pay the price only 0, right, because for him the marginal cost becomes 0. So, look at when the price is 0, this is the maximum the maximum amount, the maximum quantity he is going to demand, and he or she is going to demand this much, that means OQ1. So, you know the market value, because of this when the market price is still P1 only, market price is still P1, without insurance he will be demanding only this shaded area, this market area, this is the total healthcare expenditure. But since the marginal cost is going to be 0, you know that this area, this rectangle, this area is going to be utilized by this individual because he has insurance, right. So, you can see that the area represented, the rectangle area represented by Q1, B, C, Q2, this area you can see that this is going to be additionally utilized because the person is having insurance coverage. This actually represents the moral hazard effect. So, this is the moral hazard, this much area, this consumption, this much additional consumption of healthcare, the demand is going to be, we can be called as moral hazard or demand side moral hazard, just because this much additional consumption is happening because this exposed, this is a behavioral change. Suppose this person did not have insurance, we can see that he will be consuming only this much area only he will be consuming, but because insurance coverage, he consume not only this, in addition this much additional he or she is going to consume, that means this represent the area, this is due to the moral hazard behavior. In order to, whether this is theoretical part, that means what we shown here is the theoretical forecast. Actually there are several experiments, there are lots of research to also establish that moral hazard is a reality, this actually exists. So, one experiment was conducted by Rand Corporation, this was in 1970s. What they did, that they carried out a standard laboratory experimental design methods, where a total of 5,809 enrollees was chosen from 4 US cities and 2 rural sites. So, by giving different options of health insurance plan with the different co-payments for the selected people. Co-payments means out of the total health bill, some portion the insurer also need to pay. For example, if you so there are two ways, one is called co-payment, there are two types of co-payments. one is called co-insurance, one is called co-insurance, because here co-insurance means of the total medical bill a certain fraction, certain proportion should be paid by the insurer and the remaining will be paid by, for example, for instance here the insurance company. Suppose the co-insurance is for example 10%, that means of the total medical bill 10% should be paid by the insurer, and because this is in addition to premium they already paid, they already got insurance coverage, but out when during in order to discourage from them from using unnecessary using healthcare, in order to reduce the moral hazard, they actually make a co-insurance, then the remaining 90% will be paid by the insurance companies, that is co-insurance. Another tool is, another co-payment tool is called deductibles. Deductible means instead of percentage there is a fixed amount of the total bill, whatever the bill, at a certain amount, a fixed amount, it should be paid by the individual or the insured individual. For example, $100, this is the deductible. So that means deductible means is one of the co-payment, that means what, suppose the individual is making a healthcare payment bill of $150. So out of this 100 should be paid by the insured individual and the remaining 50 will only be paid by insurance company. So that means the initial cost, that the certain portion, that the fixed amount, it has to be paid by the insured people, right. So because of this will discourage the insured people of utilizing healthcare for unnecessary purpose, means if it's not really important or necessary, then they won't go for utilizing healthcare, because then you know that they already have to pay 100 of the deductibles. This is co-payment. So in this experiment, people have been allotted into different co-payments, starting from zero co-payment. Zero co-payment means they don't have to pay anything. That means whether this 10% or this $100, nothing. So for some individuals, they have been complete insurance, full insurance. If they go to hospital, everything will be covered by the insurance companies. But some accordingly, some individuals of these, some individuals have been allotted different levels, different rates of co-insurance and deductibles. Co-insurance, for example, some for example 5%, some samples giving 10%, some samples for example 15%, 20%, like that. So what happened here is that based on after the experiment, it was found that those who paid zero co-payment, there is overutilization, their healthcare use was much higher than those who are paying this co-payment. So that means moral hazard is a reality as per this RAN health insurance experiment. What we have discussed so far is on the demand side. Similarly, in the insurance market, there is supply side moral hazard as well. You know, supply side moral hazard means that is supplier induced demand. You know that this is mainly because if somebody is having insurance coverage, normally sometimes some doctors or hospital, they encourage them to use more healthcare, maybe asking them, even they might have gone to the hospital for some minor ailments, minor health conditions, but the hospital or doctor will encourage them or make them to use for example more diagnostics and encourage them to, for example, use hospitalization, not just for one day. Suppose what we can see that some of the most insurance companies, they say that you need to have they'll pay only for hospitalization, not for outpatient care. So because of this supply side and demand side moral hazard behavior, what will happen there, that in order to get insurance coverage, even the ailments that is requiring only outpatient care, they will be taking inpatient care as well. That means they will be getting hospitalized. And not only, sometimes some cases they may be needing only one day hospitalization, but since they already have insurance coverage, sometimes hospitals, they will prolong their stay in the hospital, and they will also will be undergoing some more expensive health care, because all they think that anyway this individual is not paying the bill, is the company is going to pay. And you know that since medical care needs are not fully monitorable, and because of these, patients have no clear cut information how much care he or she needs. So, not only that, that is one. Another thing is that anyway it does not matter to the insured person, because anyway the company is going to pay the bill. So, both of them, the hospital, the supplier, healthcare supplier, and the insured, that the patient, both of them are on the same incentive system, same page. And for insurance company, for them also is very difficult to monitor how much care actually one individual needs. So, this is called, mainly this is the supply side moral hazard problem. So, when we apply these concepts in other forms of market, not only insurance market, in equity financing. So, in the case of equity financing, the equity contracts such as common stocks you are familiar, that means are claims to a share in the profits and assets of a business. So, equity contracts are subject to a particular type of moral hazard called principal agent problem. They are subject to particular type of moral hazard called the principal agent problems. So, here you know that in the case of a firm which issued share, you know that who is the principal here, who is the agent. According to principal agent framework, the principal here is the stockholder and the agent is the manager or the employees, the managers of the company. And you know here the issue is that when managers own only a small fraction of the firm they work for, suppose they do not own the firm at all, that is one, and but mostly most of the managers they will be getting some share in the company. So, you know, when the managers own only a small fraction of the firm they work for, the stockholders who own most of the firm's equity, who we can also call them principals, are not the same people as the managers of the firm. Thus, the managers are the agents of the owners here. This separation of ownership and control involves moral hazard, in that the managers in control may act in their own interest rather than in the interest of stockholders, or that is the owners of the firm, because the managers have less incentive to maximize profit than the stockholders, that the owners do. And you know that because of that actually there is a conflict here clearly, what the management wants, the agent in the equity firms, equity financing contracts, and what the shareholders want. And you know that the shareholders, they are interested to maximize profit, they are interested more in the dividend or higher the dividend. Suppose if the company earns more profit, and when the company earns for example more profits, and obviously you know that the dividend also increases. When the dividend increases, the formula that we have studied in previous session, you know that the stock price is going to increase. When the stock price is going to increase, obviously you know that they are going to make more capital gain. So, that is what the shareholders want. So, they want more dividend, plus they can also get more capital gain as well. But about the management, because as we saw here is that they have less incentive, because they are not the owners of the firm. So, their objective function may be getting more fame for them, maybe the top management. They may be interested in doing some experiment and to introduce new reforms, maybe acquiring new market, acquiring new agencies, new firms, and expanding their market to new areas, new geographical area, and expanding their business to new areas, for example. So, that all come with the management, because that actually give them, that maximize their objective function, right, their utility function. So, but what the shareholders want, actually they want to maximize their profit. So, actually both of them are on the different pages. So, then this would lead to some kind of moral hazard issue in the equity financing firms. So, you know why? Because the principal, they are having less information, because they are not actively involved, they are not involved in the day to day operation of the firms. But at the same time, agents who are having more information, they sometimes manipulate the information, sometimes they hide the information and they manipulate the information. So, as a result, there can be some that the conflict of interest, and this would lead to moral hazard issues in equity financing. Just to summarize this point, the equity financing, what happened that the agents sometimes they invest in more risky business activities, because to maximize their objective function, right. So, the main reason that we have seen here is the separation of ownership and control of the firm. So, that means managers pursue personal benefits and power rather than the profitability of the firm. So, mainly because the conflict of interest. And how to solve moral hazard problem in equity financing? Some of the tools is that actually align managers' interest with the stockholders. So, bring both of them together, because conflict of interest, reduce the conflict of interest, that means align their interest, align managers interest with stockholders interest. So, in this case one solution is stock as compensation, stocks as a compensation, because in the payment package that most employees getting, they also get not only the salary, in addition they also get stocks, as stock also become part of their package. So, that means executives were given stock options that provided lucrative payoff if a firm's stock price rose above a certain level. That also actually given. In addition to stocks, they also, the executive, the managers, the top managers, not only the top managers, but the managers at different levels were given stock options. Suppose if the firm's stock price rose above a certain level. So, you know the why it has been done, you know, to reduce the moral hazard problem. So, then they will be investing, they will be carrying out their business activities in a way to maximize profit for the firm, so that high dividend and high stock price, right. Monitoring, here also, you know, monitoring by shareholders, that is another option. That means monitoring the monitor the business activities of the firm by a group of shareholders. But you know that this is a kind of lead to a kind of free rider problem again. Suppose of the all the shareholders, only if a few are doing this monitoring, means it's also an expensive business, it also involves real costs, lots of expenses. So, because of that, what will do that, if some shareholders of a company, suppose a few shareholders, they are monitoring the business activities of that firm, then you know that there will be a free rider problem, because the other shareholders think that anyway someone is monitoring, so why should I do? So, I am going to benefit out of it anyway. So, that means others will simply free ride here. So, that means again the issue here is that even monitoring by shareholders, though it's a solution, but the risk of free rider problem arises here as well. So, one of the solution to overcome this moral hazard problem in equity financing is the venture capital. So, how venture capital industry works? In the venture capital industry, there are mainly four main players. One is entrepreneurs who need funding, investors means who want high returns, who have money with them and who want high return, and investment bankers who need companies to sell, and the venture capitalists who make money for themselves by making market for the other three. The venture capital actually bring all the other three players together to make the equity, in the case of equity, raising equity fund and making this company to work. Venture capital, what the venture capital firms do here is that venture capital firms pool the resources of their partners, use the funds to help budding entrepreneurs start new businesses. So, in exchange for supplying the venture capital, the firm receive an equity share in the new business. So, because the verification of earnings and profit is so important in eliminating moral hazard, venture capital firms usually insist on having several of their own people participate as members of the managing body, that is the board of directors of the new businesses, so they can keep a close watch on new firms activities. You know that as a result, they can monitor the day-to-day business activities of this firm and then reduce the moral hazard problem in this market when venture capitalists come into the field. So, let us now see how moral hazard problem exists in the debt market. So, I am showing you some pictures here. So, you can see that once the firms borrow money from the bond market, sometimes actually when they are more borrowing it for, they actually clearly show that this has been borrowed for this particular business activities. But what is the guarantee that they will be using the entire fund, all the fund for this business activity only, this particular investment activity only. They will be using some of the fund or most of the fund maybe for something else as well. Maybe how can you be so sure that your investment is not being used to buy one of these vacation homes? It's also possible, right? So you can see that in India, even when you go through the dailies, newspapers, you can see that there are so lots of frauds happening, bank frauds happening. Those, for example, the many fraudsters, what they borrowed money from the banks, but they have utilized this fund for their personal benefit and personal lifestyle, right? In order to finance their expensive lifestyle, they have utilized. You are so familiar with this kind of activities happening in India. So, one of the fraud I am showing you an extreme form of moral hazard. It happened in the US. This is, you can see that this person made off. So, this is one of the biggest fraud happened in the US. He actually borrowed from many people. He actually ran a Ponzi scheme. A Ponzi scheme means actually borrowing from one firm or one source in order to repay the loan from the other source. Suppose he initially borrowed 100 crore from, raised the 100 crore from the market, and then he further borrowed that in order to repay this loan, right? That's he ran a Ponzi scheme. So that means accordingly he raised lots of funds, and that means the why he borrowed, actually he borrowed this money for investment purpose, but it has been utilized for something else. That means to run a Ponzi scheme. So in he was also well known, reputed, was the chairman of NASDAQ, chairman of organization of US securities. This is the extreme form of moral hazard. This kind of problem you can see that you might have seen elsewhere as well. So in the next session we will continue our discussion on how to reduce moral hazard problem in the finance market. Thank you.